The moment you have all maybe been waiting for, you ladies and gentlemen, you fellas, that one dude for week 3, a video that is catching on like a wildfire. But please put out them wildfires, but let this fire right here keep burning for the next however many minutes. Hey, this is what this video is all about. A best pick per position is what the title is going to have, but we have to add some context to that. I'm looking by each position and looking for leverage plays. And now, at wide receiver, there's so many, and at running back, there might be a few. So I'm just picking out one. Just know that there's multiple leverage plays in my projections and my ranks identified as lower owned players with similar projections and similar value to other player at their position. Or if you're looking at wide receivers, you can compare them to running backs because we do have a flex spot. So what does this mean? Well, I'll give you comparisons as we go through for specifics, but it basically means I'm looking for players that have similar upside, but for one reason or another, a poor week 1 or week 2 performance, injury concerns heading into this week. They don't have a sexy name. They're just picking up half the ownership as some other players who sure look like decent plays, but because of the ownership don't look as good. So we're going to go position by position and then give you a 1% flyer, a little bit of an advisory. I'm recording this on Friday, so this is dropping on Saturday. If anything wacky changes, I'll update it, but if anything minor changes, I won't. So just know if I don't have that full information, if somebody gets banged up in practice and now they're questionable, that is why. So let's get into it, starting with the quarterback position. If you have any seconds of your time right now, hit the subscribe button. We're going towards 50,000 subscribers by December, by Christmas. That would be a lovely goal as a community. So we'll start with the quarterback position, and I've got a fella for you who's going to come in at maybe 1% ownership. I have him projected for 3% as the week goes on and more people hop onto these other values like the Daniel Jones, like the Justin Fields, like the Teddy Bridgewaters. He might even go lower than the 3% projected ownership I have for him, even though I have him projected for more points than Justin Fields, for similar points to a Teddy Bridgewater, and Daniel Jones is projecting out for like 2 more points. Daniel Jones just looks good this week, but still overowned. So for 19.1 points, I have Trevor Lawrence projecting out at just 3% ownership, and he's that one dude at the quarterback position. Now the matchup is going to be interesting. We only have 2 weeks of data here for this Arizona Cardinals team, and their pass rush is going to look like a top 5 pass rush because week 1, Chandler Jones had 5 sacks on the Tennessee offensive line of Ryan Tannehill. Now week 2, they were a little bit more contained. Their secondary week 2 got lit up by Kirk Cousins, who has been looking good this year, but that secondary, if we're talking about EPA, expected points added, I would expect it to be bottom 10 by the midway point of the season. It is not a good secondary. Like Byron Murphy in the slot is going to be solid for them, but outside that, they don't have much going on back there for them. Now Trevor Lawrence has looked terrible. He ranks 31st in adjusted completion percentage. This passing offense is 32nd, but it's only been 2 weeks. He's playing from behind in this games, and in neutral pace environments, they play at the 2nd fastest pace in the NFL, meaning that before the games blow out, when it's within a 1-score game or tied, they're playing at the 2nd fastest pace. So we're going to get a lot of plays off here because we know Jacksonville, they're going to be running at that pace like I just mentioned, and we already know Arizona plays at an extremely high pace. This Arizona defense at best is middle of the pack, if you will, and you're getting a decent offensive line, one of the better parts, a maturing part of the offensive line for Jacksonville. They rank 12th so far to start the season. And here's the thing, you're just looking for that one dude. Like personally for me this week, I'm just going to prioritize the stud QBs. You'll hear that throughout the week on some of my other shows. But if you're looking for a leverage play in the lower owned range that is going to be cheap, and his stacks are cheap, $4,900 Marvin Jones, even cheaper in that same price range as a DJ Shark. So if you're looking for something there than to play all the studs everywhere else, this would be the spot I would go, because compared to Justin Fields is $5,200, a little bit cheaper. I put out a tweet about this. I have him projected for 18.4 points. So I have Justin Fields for less fantasy points. He's $300 cheaper, but he's 5% owned. I expect that to be double the ownership of Trevor Lawrence, maybe even triple if Lawrence goes down to 1% and Fields is looking like a 6 to 7%, could even be 7x. I get the hype on a Justin Fields. It makes a lot of sense. And Justin Fields, if he goes out there and scores you 20 fantasy points because he has 50 rushing yards on the ground, which is around what his player prop sits at right now, then yeah, that looks good. But is it going to win you a GPP? Is his 200 passing yards and 1 passing touchdown going to be able to sustain Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney? Probably not. The offensive line is not good, and I don't think they're going to play at a fast pace in Chicago. Teddy Bridgewater is more expensive right now than a Trevor Lawrence at $5,800. I have him projected for about a point more, 20.2 points, and he's projecting out for 2 to 3 times as much ownership. He had a great week last week. He's looked good so far, so I understand that. But still, it's because there's not been as much production from Trevor Lawrence. 5.4 yards per attempt and 5 interceptions. Give the rookie a chance. Now is the best matchup that he's had with a nice team total. And if you want to talk about the player prop market right here, Prize Picks, if you want to take this prop, you can have free bets up to $100. So if you use the code SAL on Prize Picks, you just take the over-unders on props. And here we go. This is the promotion they're running right now. You get a free bet up to $100. That's simple. FREE. If you use the code SAL, SAL, my name, that's how it is. It's linked down below. Go ahead and do it while the time lasts, while the offer lasts. I would take take the over 255.5 passing yards from Trevor Lawrence. Whether the game stays close, they'll be playing quick and getting a lot of passes off, or if they trail, that's when you start to get only passes and closer to 40 to 45 attempts for Lawrence. So you can take that prop on Prize Picks with that code SAL to get a free bet up to $100. And I'm like, hey, what's up? Hello, let's slide into the running back positions here, where I got a running back for you who's 5% owned. Even though he probably has a top 3 ceiling, maybe a top 5 ceiling on this slate, he's in arguably the best game environment of the weekend. There's about 2 to 3 games that look elite in terms of their team total and game totals. He's coming off of a week where he saw arguably the best utilization of any running back last week. Like, Derrick Henry is going to make a case because he had fucking 6 receptions in the game. But this man's name at $7,200 on DraftKings is Austin Ekeler. At just 5% ownership, I have him projected for 17.2 points. He had 18 touches last week, and what do you want? You want receptions out of your running backs. 9 of them were receptions. You love to see that. They didn't have to run the ball as much. And this is just how this team plays. They pass the ball a ton. Herbert's averaging 44 attempts per game. They use Austin Ekeler in the passing game just as much, if not more, than in the running game. Ekeler has an insane positive 34% run blocking advantage this week. He's averaging 16.5 opportunities per game through the first 2 weeks. He's getting every single touch in the red zone for their running backs right now. That is something you have not seen in the past out of Austin Ekeler. And now he gets the Kansas City Chiefs, number 32, got beaten up by the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson, dead last ranked run defense. They rank 27th in tackling, so whether it's on the ground or in the air, that's going to help Austin Ekeler. And they are now facing this solid offensive line, although Balaga is now out, but a solid offensive line that ranks 12th in run blocking so far. So the best matchup on the slate and a great game environment for a 25-26 team total, and they're going to be playing from behind, so you get more receptions from Ekeler. I like it at $7,200. Why is he only 5% owned? Because he's expensive, but this is a cheap leverage play in this game environment, right? If you want to go with a Kansas City Chiefs stack, which doesn't look like it's going to be that highly owned on a 13-game slate, with for some reason people wanting to play Daniel Jones and Justin Fields and Teddy Bridgewaters and thinking that's going to win them GPPs instead of Patrick Mahomes and the boys, and then you can run it back with a low-owned Austin Ekeler, another low-owned play that we'll talk about in a second from that game. But yeah, I mean, look at some of the comparisons. Now, these guys are cheaper, so that's why the ownership is likely higher, but $6,600 Najee Harris I have for a half a fantasy point less than a Austin Ekeler. So he should be higher owned because he looks like a better value, but not 2 to 3 times as owned as I have him at 12%. Carson right now, Chris Carson is $6,400. So a significant discount of $800 off Austin Ekeler. I have them for the same amount of fantasy points, and Carson is 3 times his own. Is that 3 times the ownership, and you now having a chalkier player in your lineup who I have for a lower ceiling, is it worth the $800? That's for you to decide. I could probably find that $800 elsewhere and find a value at wide receiver. And if you want to take it across different positions, you have Tyler Lockett projecting out for 18 fantasy points and 12% ownership. So 2 to 3 times his own for just 0.9 more points, even though he's more expensive. You can go to Calvin Ridley, and these wide receiver comparisons are a little bit better, like you can see in some of my tweets. $7,000 Calvin Ridley is 16.5 fantasy points, so less fantasy points right now for only $200 cheaper, yet he's twice his own. So Austin Ekeler for me stands in this spot where insane ceiling, insane game environment. If his price point was $6,800 to $6,900, he would probably be 12 to 15% owned. But because it's over $7K, because it's in that new range, people are not going there. They're jumping down to the Saquons, to the Najee Harrises, to the Chris Carsons range at running back. I think that personally is a mistake. He's that one due to the running back position, and I take the prop as it comes up on the screen right now, over 35.5 receiving yards for Austin Ekeler, a man who I believe in this one is probably going to find himself seeing at least 5 to 6 targets, at least 4 to 5 receptions in this game for Austin Ekeler. Can we get one big play, one 15 to 20 yard receiving to notch this one in our belts for the W on Prize Picks? Again, use that code SAL for the free bet up to $100. The over 35.5 receiving yards for Mr. Austin Ekeler. And we're going to stick right here in this game as we transition to the wide receiver position. Hey, hit the subscribe button. What are you doing? Hey, hit the like button. What are you doing? Hey, I hope you have a beautiful fucking day and a beautiful afternoon and a beautiful weekend with your significant other, with your family, with your friends, with yourself, whoever it might be, with your left hand, whoever it might be. Do what you got to do. Next up, we stick right here in this ball game. And we're going to find a wide receiver that is that one dude that is currently 5% owned. That's projecting out for 14.5 fantasy points. That even though other guys around him are at the similar price range and similar fantasy points, they're 8 to 10% owned to 12% owned. I like this guy a lot in this game environment. And you could either go to Austin Ekeler or you can go to his cheaper teammate, Mike Williams, if you're trying to find a leverage play in that Kansas City and Chargers game. Mike Williams is coming in at 5% ownership. Mike Williams in the Joe Lombardi offense is Michael Thomas, basically, the way he's playing the first 2 weeks. Yes, I'm not being ridiculous. He's seen 11 targets per game. They're not all deep targets. They're the Michael Thomas short to intermediate high conversion percentage targets, right? This Joe Lombardi concept is now infiltrating the Los Angeles Chargers and Mike Williams in a good way. So he's a similar price point to Keenan Allen, which I think a lot of people are scared about. Keenan Allen's $6,600 $600. I have Keenan Allen as a better play in terms of I have him for 17.5 fantasy points, but that is still using a lot of historical data. It's taking into account the last 2 weeks with a heavier weight, but it's still not going to make up for the last 1 to 2 years. So just keep in mind, this is 2 weeks now of projections. But even then, a 3-point projection is definitely a better play in Keenan Allen. But is it a better play when Keenan Allen is 15% owned to Mike Williams 5%? This is a similar decision you have to make with your Chris Carson versus your Austin Ekeler. I would say that it depends on what the rest of your lineup looks like, but Mike Williams for 5% looks like an insane leverage play considering the usage he's had the first 2 weeks. And now he gets this game environment. Will he be trailing and probably passing 40 plus times yet again for a 3rd week in a row for Justin Herbert? In a matchup where he'll see some Mike Hughes, it's not that bad of an overall matchup. He'll have 31 pounds on Mike Hughes when he goes up against him. This is a good spot for Mike Williams. For some comparisons outside of Keenan Allen, you can go to Courtland Sutton, who I really like. Courtland Sutton, I'm projecting out for about 2 more fantasy points and about twice the ownership. That's a spot that looks about right as of right now. Like Sutton is $400 cheaper, projecting out for 2 more points, and he's twice his own. Like that makes sense that he's twice his own. I don't have a problem with that. But this is one that I would have a problem with. Mike Evans right now, and you can see my tweet about this. Mike Evans, I end up having out there for $6,300. Mike Evans is $100 less than Mr. Mike Williams. I have Mike Evans for 0.3 more points. So say they have the same projection. Mike Evans is grading out for 8 to 10% ownership. So about twice as owned as a Mike Williams for no reason. Why is that? Because we still have our preconceived notions and our presets on what this is. This is Mike Evans coming off of a 2-touchdown game with the name of Mike Evans, 7 straight 1,000-yard years. And oh yeah, his quarterback is Tom Brady. Whereas we're looking at the other side of this one and saying, hey, Mike Williams is a deep ball specialist. He's not anymore. He's not. He's running more efficient routes right now through the first 2 weeks than Keenan Allen, his own teammate. And he's a bigger, faster body, so the red zone upside is there. Mike Williams is that one dude at the wide receiver position, and there's some props out there for him. You can see the 5.5 receptions. His receiving prop is 70.5. I don't really like these right now. I'm going to be honest with you. Like if he goes for 5 receptions, 70 yards and a touchdown, he pays off for us, but hits none of these props, right? He ends up having us 18 points on DraftKings. That's hitting for us at this price point, but we get none of these props. So I want to find his receiving touchdown prop. It's not out yet on Prize Picks if you can find it somewhere else. I would take the over a half a touchdown in the receiving department for Mike Williams in this game. Next up, we head into the tight end position where this guy, everything's just fine. Like tight ends, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, they're going to pick up ownership. Higbee's picking up ownership yet again this week for that game environment and his usage. Did not get production, but still good usage last week. Then you have Mark Andrews and Hawkinson and Pitts and Nofan. All these guys in the slate, a 13-game slate. You're going to have a lot of guys. Like there'll be 5 to 6 guys projecting out for like 8 to 12+% ownership, and the rest will be right around your 3 to 6%. This guy falls in that bucket, even though he should be one of those guys at the 10+%, because his first 2 weeks usage has been great. The offensive coordinator and the play calling and his quarterback and his offensive line look terrible, and that's holding him down, but he has looked solid. And that man's name is $4,900 Kyle Pitts, who I have projected for about 11.2 fantasy points at just 6% ownership. So it's not the 5% or below, but it's right there at 6% ownership. I like this. He's being used as a wide receiver so far 70% of the time. 70% of the time. He's seeing a 25% share of his team's air yards, which is basically top 5 right now in the NFL, seeing 7 targets per game. And he has higher conversion rates than what Calvin Ridley's getting for you because Calvin Ridley is more expensive. Calvin Ridley is not getting these deep targets because Matt Ryan doesn't have the time, or it seems like the arm at this point to get there. But let's look at some comparisons. Like right now I have Kyle Pitts for those 11.2 points at $4,900. And he plays as a wide receiver, which we want to see for fantasy 70% of the time. It means he's not on the line. There's no chance he's blocking. He's in the slot or out wide. Now Noah Fant is $4,800. He's projecting out for 11 points and 6% ownership. So basically these guys for me look like the same play. $100 cheaper, same ownership, basically the same projection, but I still take Kyle Pitts for $100 more because Noah Fant only plays as a wide receiver in the slot or out wide 29% of the time, meaning he's on the line a lot, meaning he's blocking a lot more, meaning he's chipping a lot more, meaning it's harder for him to get deeper into his route progression more often for Teddy Bridgewater. So for me, this ownership should realistically be on Noah Fant like 2% ownership compared to 10%, right? It's never going to be like that because Fant's produced in the first 2 weeks and he's got a nice name, and week 1 is going to be anchored in people's minds when he saw like 8 targets and there's no Jerry Jeudy. But Kyle Pitts looks pretty solid. I mean, Kyle Pitts even versus TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson right now is coming in at 10% owned, almost double the ownership. I only have Hawkinson for a point more, and Hawkinson's $300 more expensive. Hawkinson, I would say, has a similar ceiling even to Kyle Pitts. They're both used often as wide receivers. So I'll take Kyle Pitts as that one dude. Now, again, I will be fully transparent. I'm trying to get a lot of Travis Kelce. I'm trying to get some good amounts of Tyler Higbee. But Kyle Pitts after that is like a name that starts to come up for me because I'm not really stacking Derek Carr and Darren Waller. I'm not getting there. I'm not really stacking all that much Lamar Jackson. I'm not getting there for Mark Andrews, right? I'm not really stacking that much Jared Goff. So TJ Hawkinson for half the ownership. I'll take a guy who has similar projection and upside in Kyle Pitts. Now, Kyle Pitts, I do like the over 52.5 receiving yards. It is close. It is a close number for me. I'm slightly over that in my projection. So the player prop right here on Prize Picks, again, use the code Sally, get the free bet. It is a limited time offer. I don't know how long they're doing it. I don't know if it's the first month of the season. I don't know if it's still motherfucking October and Halloween. I don't know. But hey, it's a free bet up to $100 Rooskies. If you use the code Sally, you can take some of these props. All my props are on Twitter, by the way. If you're looking for other props that I've placed throughout the week, earlier in the week, I'm up to about 20 player props so far. But the over 52.5 is what I'm looking at on Mr. Kyle Pitts. So we get away from the stanky Pitts and we head over to the 1% flyer. There's a couple of 1% flyers I really like. Like, I thought about Christian Kirk because he's going to be 1% owned. He's still pricey, but he's going to be 1% owned, and Rondale Moore will be like 8% owned this week because of what happened last week, and people would forget that week 1 Christian Kirk ran more routes than Rondale Moore and looked good downfield, and now in stacks Christian Kirk will look like a nice leverage play, which is still true. That's all true. Everything I just said is true. But then I was scrolling a little bit more in my ownership projections, and I have ownership and optimizer, a Discord, projections, ranks, key stats, database, matchup notes every single week, showdown stuff, a closing thoughts podcast, updated, all this type of shit. Everything you can possibly ask for at an industry low price, because I'm just a one-man band. I don't got to pay 20 employees, so that's my edge. I don't have to pay a bunch of people. I do it all myself. We work a little bit harder and maybe a little bit smarter than some other people in the industry, and bam, we get to lower our prices. So you get to get in for cheaper. So join the community. We're over 800 strong right now in the Patreon Discord and on Patreon right now. Cheers to all you motherfuckers out there that are watching this. I appreciate you more than you even know. You allowed me to buy this motherfucking thick pumpkin that you see right here. You see this thick pumpkin? If you're listening on the podcast, you got to turn on your earballs and your eyeballs onto the YouTube video for a second, because, oh my God, there's a thick pumpkin sitting on my desk. And as pumpkin fucking season gets closer, I'm going to be getting even bigger and bigger pumpkins to put around me right now. We got to get one for the floor. A big old pumpkin. Oof, it's pumpkin season. Let's get it. But thank you. I'm sorry for that tangent. I appreciate the Patrons out there. But yes, get up in there if you're not already. Let's get into the 1% flyer play that I found in those ownership projections. Maybe he comes in at 2%. I think he comes in at 1%. He's expected to play this week. He's back from a personal matter last week. It's $4,700 Mr. Will motherfucking Fuller. I have Will Fuller for 12.2 fantasy points and 1% ownership. That's pretty solid. And we don't know what to expect from Jacoby Brissett, and nobody does. And we don't know what to expect from Will Fuller now that he's not on drugs anymore and steroids, making his season last year without Deshaun Watson now. Like, all this stuff, right? He's a big question mark. But because of that, he's 1% owned. But what we do know out of Will Fuller is that historically, and even last year we got to see it, this guy dominates. Like, this guy breaks the fucking slate sometimes. And I know it's Jacoby Brissett, who's not that great, but he's 1% owned, and Jacoby Brissett is not the biggest step down, and the Vegas odds did not change at all once it was Tua ruled out for Jacoby Brissett. The Vegas odds did not change, meaning that Vegas views Tua and Jacoby Brissett as the same fucking thing to the actual game. So if that's the case, and I project it that same way for fantasy basically, then I don't really let that impact my decision too much. You have to just think more so that it's Deshaun Watson you're dropping down from now and going to a Jacoby Brissett / Tua. And that's the bigger concern here for what the production looks like. But it's all baked into one, the price at $4,700, and one, the ownership at 1%. Like, if Will Fuller, if we didn't have concerns about him, he'd be $6,500 and 6 to 8% owned this week. He's not. For comparison's sakes, you can look across positions. $4,800 Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week, I'm projecting out for the exact same amount of points, 12.5 at the exact same price point. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 12% fucking owned. There's my tweet. At the same position, you have Marvin Jones, who I like. It's going to be hard for me to get away from a lot of Marvin Jones this week, but let's at least point this out. Marvin Jones, I'm projecting for 10% ownership, 5 to 10 times more than what Will Fuller is going to come in at, for only like a point and a half more in a projection of 14 points. Tyler Boyd, if T. Higgins is indeed ruled out because he's trending that way, maybe Tyler Boyd starts to become a better play. But at the exact same price point, it's only going to create Will Fuller being like 0.5% owned, because right now Tyler Boyd I have for 12.9 fantasy points, similar to Will Fuller, but 5% ownership, so 2 to 3 to 5 times his owned. If T. Higgins is out, Tyler Boyd will start to project for like 14 fantasy points and actually look like a solid play, but probably pick up even more ownership. So if you play Will Fuller at 1%, it doesn't matter if you want to play the chalkiest stack and the chalkiest running backs at that point, you're going to have a unique lineup. That's just how it plays out when you have a 1% owned guy in your lineup, even if it is like the Millie Maker contest. If it's a smaller field slate of less than 1,000 or less than 500 people, ideally less than 400 people and less than 300, the best contest you can play on DraftKings, you keep throwing your money into the Millie Maker machine while the Patrons keep winning in the single entry 3 max small field stuff. You're going to be extremely unique if you play them there. You might not have to take the risk if it's like a 215, 150 person field, but you'll be unique. It's as simple as that. You can play anybody else you want after that. So there's that one dudes at every single motherfucking position. I appreciate you watching this, you, the lady fella, the actual fella, the whatever you are out there right now. I appreciate you a ton. Please do, before you go, hit the like and subscribe and check out the sponsors of the program. It's Prize Picks, those props that we took. I have a bunch of more that I put in the Patreon Discord and also on Twitter. So check it all out. Use the code SAL for a free bet up to $100. This is the That One Dude for week 3. Get in on Patreon right now. Join the community. I'll welcome you home when you come up in there. Tweet at me or whatever you got to do and say, hey, I caved. I'm on Patreon now. Say, hey, welcome home. Welcome to the family. La Familia. Still rock it. I still rock La Familia. Shout out Hove. Shout out Jay-Z. I appreciate you all more than you know, and I'll see you in the next one.